The great hall of Thornwood Pack had never held so much silence. Juno pressed her back against the cold stone pillar, half hidden behind her sister's entourage of handmaidens. She wasn't supposed to be here. Wasn't supposed to see the Alpha King arrive to claim his bride. But she'd slipped through the servants' corridor because something in her chest had been burning since dawn, a strange heat beneath her ribs that wouldn't quiet. Now she understood why. Alpha King Alaric of the Blackmoor territories stood in the center of the hall, his massive frame rigid, his dark eyes fixed on a point beyond Seraphina's golden curls and practiced smile. His warriors flanked the doors behind him, their black leather armor catching torchlight. He'd come with 20 men and enough power to level this pack if he chose. But he wasn't looking at the woman promised to him. He was looking past her. Through her. His nostrils flared. His hands clenched at his sides. Juno felt the heat in her chest spike into something sharper. Something that made her breath catch and her vision blur at the edges with strange golden light. "My king." Seraphina dipped into a graceful curtsy, her white ceremonial gown pooling around her like snow. "I am honored to finally—" Alaric moved. Not toward Seraphina. Not toward the dais, where their parents sat in formal splendor. He turned with predator precision and walked directly toward the pillar where Juno stood frozen. The hall erupted in confused murmurs. Celeste rose from her seat, her face draining of color. Darius gripped the arm of his chair. Juno couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The burning in her chest had become a roar, a wildfire spreading through her veins as Alaric stopped 3 feet away and stared down at her with eyes that had shifted from dark brown to molten amber. His wolf. She could see his wolf looking out at her. And something inside her, something she'd never felt, never known existed, answered. The Alpha King dropped to one knee. The sound of his armored knee striking stone echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. Every wolf in attendance went absolutely still. Juno heard someone gasp, heard Seraphina's sharp intake of breath transform into a strangled cry. "Mate," Alaric said, and his voice was rough with something that sounded like reverence. "My mate." Golden light erupted from Juno's wrist. She looked down in shock as a mark she'd never seen before blazed to life on her skin. Intricate swirls of amber and black that pulsed with each beat of her heart. The light spread upward, illuminating her face, her simple servant's dress, her work-roughened hands. She was 23 years old. She had never shifted, had never felt her wolf, had been told since childhood that she was weak, that her blood ran thin, that she should be grateful the Thornwood Alpha had taken her in at all. But now, something was awakening. "This is impossible," Celeste's voice cut through the stunned silence. She descended from the dais with sharp, clicking steps, her silk gown swishing against the stone floor. "Alaric, there's been some mistake. Seraphina is your promised mate. The treaty was signed. The treaty required my true mate." Alaric rose to his full height without taking his eyes from Juno. He stood well over 6 feet, his shoulders broad beneath his black cloak, his jaw hard as granite. His close-cropped hair was dark against deep brown skin, and a scar cut through his left eyebrow, a warrior's mark. "This woman carries my bond. I can feel her wolf waking even now." "She doesn't have a wolf," Seraphina spat. She'd abandoned her practiced grace, her beautiful face twisted with fury. "She's nobody. A charity case. My parents took her in out of pity." "Seraphina," Darius's voice was sharp with warning. "Enough." But Alaric had gone very still. His beta, a tall man with locks pulled back from his angular face, stepped forward, a leather-bound book in his hands. "My king," the beta said. His voice was deep and measured. "The healer's ledger we acquired from the border village." Alaric took the book without looking away from Juno. "Do you know what this is?" Juno shook her head. Her voice had abandoned her. The mark on her wrist pulsed with warmth that seemed to spread through her whole body, unlocking doors she hadn't known existed. "Records," Alaric said. "Detailed records of medications purchased by the Thornwood pack over the past 20 years. Specifically, a compound called lunar bane." Celeste went pale, paler than Juno had ever seen her. "Lunar bane suppresses the wolf," Alaric continued. His voice had gone dangerously soft. "Suppresses the bond. Suppresses an alpha bloodline until it appears dormant. Until a girl grows up believing she is weak and worthless, instead of knowing what she truly is." The hall had become so quiet that Juno could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "You've been drugging her," Alaric said, and now he turned toward the dais, toward the Alpha and Luna who had raised her. "Since childhood. To suppress what she is. To hide her from me." "That's a lie." Celeste's voice was too high, too sharp. "Juno is simply—" "The ledger shows monthly purchases for over 2 decades, the beta interrupted. Always in Juno's name. Always the same dosage. Would you like me to read the healer's notes aloud, Lady Celeste? His observations about the girl's unusual reactions to the compound? His questions about why you wanted her wolf suppressed so completely?" Seraphina stumbled backward, her face draining of color. "Mother, what did you do?" But Celeste didn't answer. She was staring at Alaric with something that looked like fear. Real fear. Juno found her voice. It came out cracked and rough, like it had been locked away for years. "The tea. You always made me drink the tea before bed. Said it would help me sleep." Celeste flinched. "Every night," Juno continued, and the burning in her chest was transforming into something hotter. Anger. Pure, righteous anger that she'd never allowed herself to feel before. For as long as I can remember. Even when I said it made me feel sick. Even when I begged you to stop." "You don't understand," Celeste's voice cracked. "I did it to protect." "To protect whom?" Alaric's roar made the torches flicker. Several wolves in the crowd dropped to their knees instinctively, responding to raw alpha power. "Your scheme? Your false daughter's claim to my throne?" He turned to the pack elders who sat along the eastern wall, 3 old wolves with gray in their hair and judgment in their eyes. "Verify the bond mark," Alaric commanded. "Now." The eldest of them rose with obvious reluctance. Elder Marcus had known Juno since she was a child, had watched her grow up in the shadows of this pack. He approached her slowly, his rheumy eyes fixed on the golden mark still blazing on her wrist. He took her hand gently, studied the mark, closed his eyes and breathed deep. When he opened them again, they were wet with tears. "True mate bond," he said, and his voice shook. "Confirmed and witnessed. The mark is ancient, royal." Juno felt something crack open inside her. The golden light pulsed brighter. "The bond to the Blackmore Alpha line," Elder Marcus continued, "is undeniable. This woman is the true mate of Alpha King Alaric." Alaric turned back to Seraphina with cold fury in his eyes. "You knew." "I didn't." "You knew she was meant for me. You knew what your mother was doing. And you let it continue because you wanted what was hers." Seraphina's jaw tightened. For a moment, Juno saw the mask slip, saw the ambition and resentment that had always lurked beneath her sister's perfect smile. "I am Seraphina Thornwood," she said through clenched teeth. "I was raised to be Luna. I was trained, educated, prepared. She's nothing but a—" "You are nothing," Alaric's voice cut like a blade. "The promised Luna title was never yours to claim. It belonged to my true mate from the moment of her birth." He raised his hand and spoke in the formal cadence of pack law. "By the authority of the Blackmore throne and the witness of these elders, I hereby strip Seraphina Thornwood of all claims to the Luna position. She is not my mate. She is not my promised. She is nothing to me or my pack." Seraphina's scream echoed off the stone walls as her mother caught her before she could collapse. But Juno barely heard it. She was staring at the mark on her wrist, at the golden light that had finally begun to feel like home. The silence that followed Seraphina's scream stretched like a wound. Juno watched her adoptive sister crumple against their mother, watched Celeste's perfectly composed mask crack into something desperate and calculating. The golden light from her bond mark had dimmed to a steady pulse, but she could still feel it, warmth spreading through her veins like sunlight after a lifetime of winter. "This changes nothing." Darius rose from his seat on the dais, his deep brown skin ashen beneath the torchlight. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and silver at the temples, and he'd ruled Thornwood Pack for 30 years. But his voice held a tremor Juno had never heard before. The treaty was negotiated in good faith. "We offered a daughter of suitable rank. You offered a fraud." Alaric hadn't moved from Juno's side. His presence was a wall of heat and barely contained power, and some part of her, some newly awakened instinct, wanted to lean into it. The original treaty required the true mate of the Blackmore Alpha. Your scholars knew this. Your elders knew this. He gestured toward Elder Marcus, who had retreated to his seat with shaking hands. They all knew, and they let you hide her anyway. Darius descended the dais steps slowly, his formal robes dragging against stone. "Alaric, be reasonable. Whatever confusion has occurred here, surely we can negotiate." "Negotiate?" The word came out like a snarl. "You drugged my mate for 20 years, suppressed her wolf, stole her birthright, and now you want to negotiate?" Juno's chest tightened. She'd spent her entire life watching Darius command this hall, watching him make decisions that affected hundreds of lives with calm authority. She'd feared him, respected him, tried desperately to earn even a fraction of the approval he showered on Seraphina. Now she saw him for what he truly was, a man who had built his power on lies. "We can offer compensation," Darius pressed forward, his hands spread in supplication. "Territory along the eastern border, prime hunting grounds. Gold from our mines. Whatever the Blackmore throne requires to consider this. Misunderstanding. Resolved." "You think you can buy your way out of treason?" The word landed like a physical blow. Several wolves in the crowd gasped. Juno saw Elder Marcus close his eyes as if in pain. "Treason," Alaric repeated. "The treaty between our packs was sealed with sacred oaths. The requirement was specific, my true mate or none at all. By hiding her existence, by suppressing her wolf, by attempting to substitute another woman in her place, you violated not just pack law but the covenant between our bloodlines." Darius's composure finally cracked. "She wasn't supposed to exist." The hall went deathly still. Juno felt the words strike somewhere deep, somewhere that had always known she didn't belong in this family. Always known she was tolerated rather than loved. "Explain." Alaric's voice was ice. It wasn't Darius who answered. It was Celeste. She stepped forward, leaving Seraphina slumped against a pillar with mascara streaking her perfect cheeks. Celeste's silk gown whispered against the floor as she moved, and when she spoke, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "The Blackwood Pack was destroyed 24 years ago. You know this. Everyone knows this. The Alpha, his Luna, their entire line, wiped out in a single night by rogue wolves. Celeste's dark eyes found Juno, and there was something cold in them. Something that had always been there, hiding beneath maternal smiles. What no one knew was that their infant daughter survived. A servant fled with her in the chaos, brought her to our borders seeking sanctuary." Juno couldn't breathe. The golden mark on her wrist pulsed faster, matching her racing heart. "I recognized what she was the moment I saw her," Celeste continued. "Alpha blood. Royal blood. The lost heir of Blackwood, the pack that had once rivaled even Blackmore in power. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I also knew what she would become if anyone discovered her true identity. A threat to my daughter's future. A complication to the alliance we'd been building with the Blackmore throne. So you took her in. Alaric's voice was dangerously quiet. Not out of mercy. Out of strategy. I kept her alive, Celeste snapped. I could have handed her over to the rogues who destroyed her family. I could have left her to die in the woods. Instead, I gave her a home. Gave her food and shelter and... You gave her poison. Juno barely recognized her own voice. It came from somewhere deeper than she'd ever reached before, somewhere that the lunar bane had kept locked away for 2 decades. Every night. Every single night since I was a child. You poured that tea and watched me drink it and smiled while you stole my wolf from me. Celeste's composure flickered. You don't understand what you are. What you would have become without intervention. The Blackwood bloodline carries power that... That what? Juno stepped forward, and she felt something shift in the air around her. The crowd murmured. She saw several wolves lower their eyes instinctively. That threatened you? That made Seraphina look ordinary by comparison? You were never supposed to wake up. Seraphina's voice cut through the tension, raw and ragged. She'd pushed herself upright, her white ceremonial gown stained with tears, her perfect curls disheveled. Mother said the drugs would keep you dormant forever. She said as long as you took them, you'd never know what you were. Never feel the bond. Never, her voice cracked. Never take what was supposed to be mine. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Juno stared at the woman she'd called sister for 23 years. Seraphina, who had always been given the best clothes, the finest tutors, the warmest praise. Seraphina, who had laughed when the other pack children called Juno weak. Who had watched her struggle and stumble, and never once offered help. Who had known. All along. How long? Juno's voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. How long have you known what I was? Seraphina's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. Seraphina. Alaric's command voice rang through the hall, and even Juno felt the weight of it. Answer your sister's question. She's not my sister. The words were poison. She's a cuckoo in the nest. A Blackwood orphan my mother was stupid enough to keep alive. Seraphina's beautiful face twisted into something ugly. I've known since I was 12. Since I found Mother's journals, and read exactly what she planned to do with you. 12 years old. Seraphina had been 12 when she discovered the truth. Which meant she'd spent the next 11 years watching Juno drink that tea every night, watching her grow weaker while pretending to be an innocent sister. 11 years of deliberate silence. Deliberate cruelty. The golden mark on Juno's wrist flared bright enough to cast shadows. Enough! Elder Marcus rose from his seat, his old voice carrying through the hall with surprising strength. This testimony is sufficient. The council must convene. He looked at the other 2 elders, and Juno saw something pass between them. Fear. Resignation. The weight of a judgment none of them wanted to render. The crimes confessed in this hall demand immediate review, Elder Marcus continued. Violation of sacred treaty. Suppression of royal bloodline. Conspiracy to commit fraud against the Blackmore throne. He turned to Darius and Celeste, with eyes that held no mercy. Alpha Darius, Luna Celeste, Seraphina Thornwood, you will stand before this council and answer for your actions. Celeste's composure shattered. Marcus, you can't possibly. We've ruled this pack together for 30 years. Everything I did was to protect. To protect your ambition. Alaric cut her off. Not your pack. Not this woman you claim to raise as a daughter. Your ambition and nothing more. He turned to Juno, and his expression softened by the smallest degree. His dark eyes searched her face, and she saw something there that made her chest ache. Recognition, concern, the first threads of a bond that had been waiting her entire life to form. "The council will convene," he said, his voice gentler than she'd yet heard it. "And you will have a choice to make." Juno looked at the family that had raised her. At the parents who had drugged her. At the sister who had watched it happen and smiled. Then she looked at the mark on her wrist, blazing gold against her brown skin. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to have a real choice at all. The council elders retreated to their chamber, and the great hall emptied in uneasy silence. Wolves filed out through the heavy oak doors, casting backward glances at the 4 figures who remained near the dais. No one spoke. No one dared. Juno stood apart from the family that had raised her, the golden mark on her wrist, now a steady glow rather than the blazing beacon it had been moments before. She could feel Alaric's presence behind her like a wall of heat, his warriors posted at every exit. There would be no escape for the Thornwoods. No convenient disappearance before judgment could fall. Darius broke the silence first. "Juno." His voice had lost its commanding edge. He sounded tired. "Old. Whatever you think of us right now, you must understand. We gave you everything. A home. A name. A place in this pack when you had nothing. You gave me chains." The words came easier now, flowing from that newly awakened place inside her. "You dressed them up as kindness, but they were chains all the same." "You would have been hunted." Celeste stepped forward, her silk gown wrinkled, her careful makeup smeared. She looked almost human now, almost like a mother who had made terrible choices for reasons she believed were right. Almost. "The wolves who destroyed your family were never caught. Do you understand what that means? They're still out there. Still looking for any survivors of the Blackwood line. I kept you hidden. I kept you safe. You kept me weak." Juno turned to face the woman who had poured poison into her tea every night for 2 decades. "If those wolves came for me tomorrow, I couldn't even shift to defend myself. That's not protection. That's control." Celeste's expression flickered. Something that might have been guilt, quickly buried beneath years of practiced justification. "The lunar bane was necessary. Your wolf was too strong. Without suppression, your power would have manifested by your 3rd birthday. Every pack within 100 miles would have sensed it, would have known exactly what you were. So instead, you made me believe I was broken." Juno's voice cracked on the last word. "Do you have any idea what that felt like? Watching every other child in this pack shift for the first time while I just stood there, empty, defective. While you patted my hand and told me some wolves were simply born without gifts. I did what was necessary. You did what was convenient." Alaric moved to stand beside Juno, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His dark eyes were fixed on Celeste with barely contained fury. "The Blackwood bloodline threatened your plans for your daughter. So you caged it. Buried it. Hoped it would never rise." Darius stepped between his wife and the Alpha King, his hands raised in a gesture that was half supplication, half defense. "Alaric, please. Let us discuss this privately. There must be some arrangement we can reach." "Arrangement?" Alaric's laugh was cold. "You still don't understand what you've done, do you? This isn't a trade dispute. This isn't a border skirmish that can be settled with golden handshakes." He gestured toward Juno, toward the mark that blazed on her wrist. "You stole the mate of the Blackmore Alpha. You suppressed a royal bloodline. You committed treason against the sacred laws that govern all packs. The treaty said nothing about. The treaty required my true mate." Alaric's voice rose, and Juno felt the power in it ripple through the air. Alpha command, barely restrained. "Your scholars negotiated those terms. They knew exactly what they were agreeing to. And when my true mate appeared in your pack as an orphaned child, you chose to hide her rather than honor your word." Darius's jaw tightened. "We chose to protect our daughter's future. You chose to commit fraud." Alaric moved closer, and even Juno felt the urge to step back from the raw dominance radiating from him. "You chose to drug an innocent child for 20 years. You chose to offer me a substitute bride while my true mate served in your kitchens, and wore your cast-off clothes and believed herself worthless. His voice dropped to something lethal. And now you want to negotiate your way out of consequences? What would you have us do? Celeste's composure cracked completely. Hand over a child to strangers? Trust that your pack would protect her better than we could? We had no guarantee. You had my word? Alaric's voice was ice. The word of the Blackmore throne, given in sacred treaty. But you decided your daughter's ambition was worth more than honor. Worth more than the life of an innocent girl. The silence that followed was heavy with truth no one could deny. Juno watched her adoptive parents, really watched them, and saw something she'd never noticed before. The calculation behind Darius's fatherly concern. The ambition beneath Celeste's maternal warmth. They had never loved her. They had tolerated her. Contained her. Used her existence as a tool to secure their own daughter's position, while simultaneously ensuring that existence could never threaten it. Why keep me alive at all? The question emerged from somewhere deep. If I was such a threat, why not just let me die? Celeste flinched. Actually flinched. I'm not a monster. You're something worse. Juno felt the golden light pulse brighter. You're a woman who saw a child in need and immediately calculated how to use her. You kept me alive because a dead Blackwood heir might raise questions, might attract attention. But a living one, drugged and broken and grateful for scraps of affection. She shook her head slowly. That you could control. You don't understand politics. Celeste's voice turned sharp. You don't understand what it takes to survive in this world. The Blackwood pack was destroyed because they were too proud, too powerful. They made enemies in every direction because they refused to bow, refused to compromise, refused to... They were murdered. Alaric cut her off. By wolves who have never been brought to justice. Wolves who conveniently disappeared after eliminating the one bloodline that might have challenged the power structure of the Western Territories. His eyes narrowed. Wolves who perhaps had allies in packs that benefited from Blackwood's fall. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Darius went very still. You can't possibly be suggesting... I'm suggesting nothing. Alaric's voice was dangerously calm. Yet. But the council will have questions. Many questions. About how a Thornwood patrol happened to find a fleeing Blackwood servant on the exact night of the massacre. About why no effort was ever made to investigate or avenge the destruction of an allied pack. About where certain funds flowed in the months before the attack. Celeste's face went gray. We had nothing to do with... Darius started. Then you have nothing to fear from the council's investigation. Alaric turned his back on them both, dismissing them as thoroughly as if they'd already been sentenced. He faced Juno, and his expression shifted again, harder to read, but softer somehow. The choice remains yours. Whatever the council decides about their fate, your path is your own. Juno looked at him. Really looked. At the scar through his eyebrow earned in battle she knew nothing about. At the hard line of his jaw softened slightly when he spoke to her. At the way his dark eyes held something that might be patience, might be hope, might be the first stirrings of a bond that had waited 23 years to form. What happens if I stay here? She asked quietly. You remain in the pack that drugged you, that lied to you. That would have sold you into a false marriage to preserve their daughter's position. His voice held no judgment, only truth. You would be free of any obligation to me or Blackmore. But you would also remain under the authority of whatever Alpha rises after the council renders judgment. And if I leave with you? Something flickered in his eyes. Then you claim your birthright. The Blackwood bloodline lives again. My pack becomes your pack. My territory becomes your home. He paused. And the bond between us, that we discover together, at whatever pace feels right. The mark on her wrist pulsed warm. Behind her, Juno heard Seraphina sob, heard Celeste murmuring frantic reassurances, heard Darius pacing, his boots striking stone in an anxious rhythm. The family that had raised her. The family that had betrayed her. The choice when it came was not difficult at all. The council chamber was smaller than the great hall, but the weight of judgment made it feel suffocating. Juno stood before the three elders, her back straight, despite the trembling she couldn't quite control. Alaric remained at the entrance, his warriors flanking the doors. This was pack law. Thornwood law. He had no authority here until the council rendered its verdict. But his eyes never left her face. Elder Marcus sat in the center seat, his weathered hands folded on the ancient oak table before him. Elder Constance occupied the chair to his right, her silver locks pulled back severely from a face that had witnessed 3 generations of pack politics. Elder Jerome completed the trio, his dark eyes unreadable beneath heavy brows. Darius and Celeste stood to Juno's left, their formal composure cracking around the edges. Seraphina had been brought in last, her ceremonial gown exchanged for simple gray, the color of the accused under pack law. "This council has heard testimony," Elder Marcus began, his voice carrying the full weight of his 87 years. "We have reviewed the healer's ledger. We have confirmed the bond mark. We have witnessed confessions spoken freely in the great hall." Celeste opened her mouth to speak. "You will remain silent until addressed." Elder Constance's command cut through the chamber. "The time for explanations has passed. What remains is judgment." The word hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Elder Jerome leaned forward. "Juno, before we proceed, we must hear your statement. You are the injured party. You are also—" He paused, glancing at the mark on her wrist. "You are also a figure of some complexity. The last of the Blackwood line. The true mate of the Blackmore Alpha. And a member of this pack since infancy." "Former member," the words came out steady. Stronger than Juno had expected. "I was never truly part of this pack. I was a prisoner who didn't know she was imprisoned. A weapon being kept dormant in case it might someday be useful." Elder Marcus inclined his head. "And what would you have us do with those who imprisoned you?" Juno turned to face Darius and Celeste. Her adoptive father wouldn't meet her eyes. 23 years of watching him lead this pack, of studying his decisive commands and strategic brilliance, and now he couldn't. Look at the girl he'd helped cage. Celeste stared straight ahead, her jaw tight, her hands clasped so hard her knuckles had gone pale. "I used to dream about earning your approval." Juno's voice was quiet, but it carried. "Every meal I prepared, every chore I completed, every time I smiled through the headaches the tea gave me. I thought if I just tried harder, you might love me the way you loved Seraphina." Celeste flinched. "I know now that was never possible. You never saw me as a daughter. You saw me as a problem to be managed. A threat to be contained." Juno felt the golden mark pulse warm against her skin. "I could hate you for that. Part of me does. But what I want more than revenge is truth, justice, and a future where no other child suffers what I suffered." She turned back to the elders. "I want the records made public. Every pack in the territories should know what the Thornwoods did. How they violated sacred treaty. How they drugged a royal heir for 2 decades to elevate their own bloodline." She paused, letting the words land. "And I want them stripped of the authority they used to commit these crimes." Elder Constance's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. "The council has already reached preliminary conclusions," she said. "Alpha Darius, Luna Celeste. You are hereby charged with violation of sacred treaty, suppression of royal bloodline, fraud against an allied throne, and abuse of a minor in your custody." Darius's face strained of color. "The evidence is irrefutable. Your own confessions, given freely before witnesses, confirm your guilt." Elder Constance turned to the parchment before her. "The sentence is exile. Permanent exile from Thornwood territory and all allied lands." You will leave with only what you can carry. Your titles, your properties, your positions, all are forfeit." "No," Celeste's composure shattered. "No, you can't. I've served this pack for 30 years. You've betrayed it," Elder Marcus's voice was cold. "You've brought shame upon us all. The neighboring packs will speak of Thornwood as a den of liars for generations. That is your legacy." Celeste turned to Juno, desperation cracking through her careful mask. "Please. Whatever I did, I raised you. I fed you, clothed you, kept you alive when I could have." "Could have what?" Juno stepped closer, and she felt that golden light flare brighter. "Let me die? Handed me to the wolves who murdered my family?" She shook her head slowly. "You don't get credit for choosing the cruelty that benefited you over the cruelty that didn't." Seraphina made a small, broken sound. Elder Jerome turned his attention to the youngest Thornwood. "Seraphina, your complicity in this conspiracy has been established. You knew of the drugging for 11 years. You participated in the deception that would have seen you bonded to an alpha under false pretenses." "I was protecting my future," Seraphina's voice came out thin. "Desperate. She was a nobody. A servant. Why should she get everything that was promised to me?" "Because it was never promised to you," Alaric's voice carried from the doorway. "It was promised to my true mate, the woman you helped imprison." Seraphina's beautiful face twisted with hatred. "She's not even real nobility. She's an orphan. A stray. My mother should have let her starve in those woods." "Enough." Elder Constance's command silenced her. "Seraphina Thornwood, you are hereby stripped of pack protection. You may remain in neutral territory if any pack will have you, but you are no longer welcome in Thornwood lands. You will carry no rank, no title, no claim to the status your parents purchased with their crimes." The sound Seraphina made was barely human. Juno watched her adoptive sister crumple, watched the future Seraphina had schemed for dissolve like morning mist. There was no satisfaction in it. Only a hollow ache where something like sisterhood might have grown if circumstances had been different. The sentences are rendered. Elder Marcus rose from his seat, his old bones creaking. "They will be executed at dawn. Guards will escort the condemned to the border." He turned to Juno, and his expression softened. "As for you, child, you are free. Free to stay, free to go, free to claim whatever future calls to you." Juno looked at the elders who had watched her grow up believing she was worthless. At the parents who had made her believe it. At the sister who had enjoyed her suffering. Then she turned and walked toward the doorway where Alaric waited. He didn't move as she approached, didn't reach for her or speak. Just watched with those dark eyes that held patience and hope and the first stirrings of something she wasn't ready to name. Juno stopped in front of him. The bond mark on her wrist blazed warm, answering something deep in her chest that had waited 23 years to wake. "I choose to leave." Her voice was steady, clear, her own. "I choose to claim my birthright. I choose." She paused, feeling the weight of the words. "I choose to see what this bond becomes. On my terms, at my pace." Alaric inclined his head. "Then we go together." Behind her, Juno heard Celeste cry out. Heard Darius call her name one last time, his voice cracking on the syllables he taught her to answer to. She didn't look back. The council chamber doors swung open, and Juno walked through them with her head high and her shoulders straight. The mark on her wrist pulsed steady and sure, a beacon of everything she'd been denied, everything she was only beginning to understand. The family that had betrayed her would face their exile at dawn, but her own exile had already ended. The morning air cut sharp and cold as Juno stepped through the pack hall's great doors. Behind her, the Thornwood wolves had gathered in silence, not the reverent silence of a celebration, but the heavy quiet of witnesses to something irreversible. She felt their eyes on her back, curious, uncertain, some openly hostile. These were the wolves, who had watched her scrub floors and serve meals, who had whispered about her weakness when they thought she couldn't hear. Now they watched her walk beside the Alpha King of Blackmoor, and none of them knew what to make of it. Alaric's warriors fell into formation around them, their black leather armor catching the pale dawn light. The beta who had produced the healer's ledger, Marcus, she'd learned his name was, walked 3 paces behind, his angular face alert for any threat. They moved through the courtyard, where Juno had spent countless mornings hauling water from the well, past the kitchens, where she'd learned to cook, because Celeste insisted she earn her keep. Every step felt like shedding a skin she'd never known was suffocating her. The bond mark will continue to strengthen. Alaric spoke quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. As the lunar bane leaves your system, you may experience intensity, emotions, senses, the connection between us. It will take time to find balance. Juno glanced down at her wrist, where the golden swirls still pulsed with steady warmth. How long? Weeks, perhaps. Months for full recovery. His dark eyes met hers briefly, then returned to scanning their surroundings. Always alert. Always protective. My healers have experience with suppression compounds. They'll help you through the transition. Transition. Such a clinical word for the earthquake happening inside her. They reached the main gates, and Juno felt her steps slow without her permission. The massive iron bars had marked the boundary of her world for 23 years. She'd passed through them perhaps a dozen times, always on errands, always expected to return, always watching the horizon beyond, with a longing she couldn't name. The guards stationed at the gate dropped to their knees as Alaric approached. Not for him, Juno realized with a start. For her. Word has spread quickly. Alaric's voice held a note of something that might have been satisfaction. By nightfall, every pack in the Western Territories will know that the Blackwood heir lives, that she walks with Blackmoor. The Blackwood heir. The words still felt foreign against her thoughts, a title that belonged to someone braver, someone stronger, someone who hadn't spent her life believing she was broken. But the mark on her wrist pulsed warm, and something deep inside her answered. The gates swung open. Beyond them, the road stretched toward the forest that marked the boundary between Thornwood and neutral territory. Alaric's traveling party waited there, horses, supply wagons, more warriors than Juno had ever seen in one place. All of them turned at the sound of the gates, all of them straightening when they saw who approached. Juno took one step past the threshold, then another. The iron closed behind her with a sound like finality. Wait. The voice came from behind, rough, broken, desperate. Juno turned to see Darius pressed against the gate bars, his formal robes disheveled, his face drawn with something that might have been genuine grief. Please, his voice cracked. Just let me say goodbye. Let me explain why. There is no explanation. Juno's voice came out steadier than she felt. There are only choices. You made yours 23 years ago. I'm making mine now. I tried to protect you. Darius's hands wrapped around the iron bars. The wolves who destroyed your family. You don't know what they're capable of. What they would have done if they'd found you. You don't get to claim protection. The golden light flared brighter, and Juno felt something shift in her chest. Her wolf, stirring. Awakening after a lifetime of chemical imprisonment. You claimed control. Ownership? You kept me weak because weak was convenient. Because weak didn't threaten your daughter's future. Celeste appeared beside Darius, her silk gown replaced by the gray wool of the exiled. Her perfect composure had crumbled entirely, leaving something raw and almost human beneath. We loved you. The words sounded like they cost her something. In our way, we loved you. Juno stared at the woman who had poured poison into her tea every night for 2 decades, who had watched her suffer through headaches and weakness and endless small humiliations, and had smiled through all of it. You loved what I represented, Juno said quietly. A threat contained, a rival eliminated, a future secured. She shook her head slowly. That's not love, that's strategy. Seraphina was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she couldn't bear to watch. Perhaps the guards had already taken her to wherever the exiled went to begin their new, diminished lives. Juno found she didn't care either way. Goodbye. The word felt insufficient for 23 years of lies. Insufficient for the childhood she'd never gotten to have, the wolf she'd never gotten to know, the life she'd never gotten to live. But it was the only word that mattered now. She turned her back on Thornwood for the final time. Alaric fell into step beside her as they walked toward his waiting company. His presence was warm and solid, and some newly awakened instinct in Juno wanted to lean into it, to let someone else be strong for just a moment. But she kept her spine straight and her eyes forward. The Blackmore warriors parted as they approached, forming two precise lines that created a path toward the led horses. Every one of them dropped to one knee as Juno passed, heads bowed, fists pressed to hearts. She stopped walking. "They honor you." Alaric's voice was gentle, the last of a royal line. "The true mate of their Alpha. You've done nothing to earn their loyalty yet, but they offer it anyway. That's what the bond means to my pack." Juno looked at the warriors kneeling in the morning mist, at their scarred hands and steady eyes, and the respect they offered so freely. These wolves didn't know her, didn't know if she was kind or cruel, brave or cowardly, worthy or worthless. They only knew she was theirs. Something cracked open in her chest, something that had been frozen for so long she'd forgotten it could thaw. "Rise." Her voice came out stronger than she expected, commanding almost. "I haven't earned your knees yet, but I will." The warriors rose as one, and Juno saw something shift in their expressions. Surprise, perhaps, and the beginning of something else. Respect. Alaric gestured toward a dark horse with intelligent eyes and a silver mane. "Can you ride?" "I can learn." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Then we'll go slowly." He helped her mount, his hands steady and careful on her waist. The contact sent a pulse of warmth through the bond mark, and Juno felt her breath catch at the intensity of it. Too much. Too fast. But also, somehow, exactly right. Alaric swung onto his own horse with practiced ease, bringing his mount alongside hers. His beta called out orders, and the company began to move. Juno looked back once as they crested the first hill. Thornwood lay below them, gray stone walls catching the morning sun. The pack hall where she'd served countless meals. The kitchens where she'd learned to disappear. The cramped servants' quarters where she'd drunk poison every night and dreamed of being someone else. The gates had closed behind her. She was someone else now. When she turned forward again, Alaric was watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything she wasn't ready to name. "My pack waits 3 days, ride from here," he said. "When we arrive, they'll kneel for you as these warriors did. They'll look to you as Luna, even before the formal ceremony. Even before we—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Even before we discover what this bond becomes." Juno felt the mark pulse warm on her wrist, felt her wolf stir somewhere deep inside, stretching awake after 23 years of forced slumber. "And what do you think it will become?" she asked quietly. Alaric was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held something she hadn't heard before. Vulnerability, perhaps, or hope. Something worth waiting for. The morning sun broke through the mist as they rode toward the boundary line. Behind them, the gates of Thornwood grew smaller with each passing moment. Ahead, the forest opened into lands Juno had never seen, territories she'd never walked, a future she'd never dared imagine. The bond mark pulsed steady and sure against her skin. The gates closed behind her forever. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and stand with our pack for the next one.